Well, first they were going to meet here ahead of NATO after these infamous comments from President Macron of the brain-dead NATO, somewhat agreeing with President Trump that NATO as it stands cannot carry on, that it needs a new leadership, a new thinking, needs to rethink its future. They might differ on the diagnosis and how to address that, but very much saying NATO as it exists cannot carry on. That's maybe, but overnight you have these news coming on trade. First is WTO ruling on this long-standing battle on Airbus subsidies. Now WTO ruling that the European countries have failed to address the distortion that some of the money that they've been allowing Airbus to have in subsidies, they have failed to address those. And so the US Trade Department came out saying they might put some extra tariffs to the ones announced already in October, $7.5 billion already announced. They would affect some aircraft, about 10% on airlines, but also wine, about 25% tariff. But they came out yesterday saying they might put some extra tariffs given this WTO ruling. And also overnight, as you mentioned, this tech tax ruling, the US Trade Department publishing yesterday their conclusion of the investigation that has started in July when the French Parliament voted the 3% tech tax on companies that would make $750 million and about 25 million of those in euros, excuse me, not dollars, and 25 million of those in France. Then they would have to pay a tax of 3%. The US Trade put this investigation out about whether this was an unfair trade practice. So their conclusion were published yesterday, and with a list of goods that would potentially be affected. And you had cheese and you had champagne on that list, which escaped the tariffs on the WTO ruling that I just mentioned in October, and also handbags. So we'll have to keep an eye also on companies like LVMH at the open and this sort of companies and shares, because they could move. They were spared in this WTO ruling list of goods that could be impacted by tariffs in the US. Now these new tariffs on these French goods on the back of the tech tax could come into play up to 100%. Now President Trump, the administration, have to wait and see whether they will impose them, but this list has been put out as a warning. So all this will very much be on the table in this discussion when President Macron and President Trump meet this afternoon at 3 CET here at the US Ambassador's residence in London.
It's such a significant one for markets because there's been an assumption, and I think it's been an unfair assumption, that President Trump can only wage one trade war at a time. And we've got many investors waiting for a phase one trade deal to be inked. And they thought, well, once that gets done with China, maybe we can start having another look at other trade wars that could be waged potentially with Europe. But here we are. There isn't any waiting it out for a phase one trade deal. We have potentially another trade threat at this point. And if you think about the digital services tax and whether there's any global accord to go forward with it, you've got to wonder whether the French could be going it alone on this tax, and whether this threat between the US and France will just be these two countries alone, or whether it could widen out to other countries like the UK that has a digital services tax, Italy, Austria and Turkey. What do you think? What do you think the French line is going to be on this, and will they stick to it if there is a full clash with the United States?
Well, you remember that at the moment there is a truce. They came to an agreement at the G7 in Biarritz to give the OECD, to put the OECD in charge of coming up with a global frame for tech tax across the world. So the OECD have to come up in 2020 with their proposal. In January, there's a first meeting where they represent the first draft of this proposal. And this is when really the US administration will establish whether they think progress is going fast enough and whether they're happy with what is being put on the table. And only then we will know if and when the Trump administration decide to put some tariffs on those French goods on the back on the French tax. Of course, you have to remember President Trump is starting to be on campaign mode. Trade war has been part of his rhetoric, and there's a certain element of unpredictability here. So we'll have to wait and see on how he wants to play out, as you said, starting several fronts on the trade war here. So very much part of the discussion for the next few weeks.
Hi, I'm Joanna Bersecci, and thank you for watching. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thank you for watching.